Why, hello there! Welcome to episode 2 of Proverbs Explained, where I find proverbs and, well, attempt to explain them. You've already read the title, so I'm going to assume you know what you're here for, but if you missed the title, today's idiom we shall be exploring is the well-known "Fools rush in where angels fear to tread." And this one is very interesting and gives us an excuse to talk about all kinds of cool history, so that is exactly what we're going to do, and I do hope you find this as interesting as I did. So this one is really cool for the fact that its origin is actually well known and not disputed, making this part of the story a whole lot easier. So it's traced all the way back to 1709 from the English poet Alexander Pope's An Essay on Criticism, and it was just one of many lines effectively and looked a little like this. I think even Pope himself would have been shocked at the idea of this line being kind of like used today centuries later. Back in the 18th century, however, a fool wouldn't have been such a derogatory term as it kind of is today. It would have been more meant in the actual sense that somebody was like actually acting foolish. And given the context of the greater work the idiom appears in, this was most likely aimed at his critics in an attempt to fire back at them, as they were increasingly getting more vocal towards him for a litany of reasons, mainly because he was Roman Catholic. On a greater scale, the message behind the proverb is basically warning against impulsivity, saying that a fool would rush in, where an angel would fear to tread, implies the fool might not entirely know the risks of what they are doing or partaking in, causing them to kind of rush into something thinking it's a golden ticket. There is a sense that it's speaking to inexperience and experience, and how that affects our ability to make educated choices. I mean, fairly self-explanatory, it's obviously in the name, but it's a warning against rushing into things, put very simply. But let's explore the essay a little bit closer and have a look at the man behind the writing, as he's a very interesting chap. Alexander Pope's Essay on Criticism was first published anonymously in May of 1713. He went on to publish many other works aside from this one, all going on to be hugely influential. Still today, they're actually used in universities around the world to teach students of English literature, which is pretty cool. The essay as a whole is an attempt to balance theology and aesthetics, and is mainly concerned with how good literary criticism and poetry could stay in harmony. To harmonise them, he shows a relation between the classical notion of nature and wit, both being essential to poetry as well as criticism. He is of the view that both poetry and criticism are linked to nature and wit, and the best of both are divinely inspired. But who exactly is Alexander Pope? I hear you asking there at the back, and thank you, what a tasty question. He is a very prominent figure in history, so it's definitely worth the time, I promise you. Alexander Pope was an English poet and satirist from the early 18th century and was a key exponent to the literary movement of the time, going on to shape English literature to this very day. He was born in London on the 21st of May, 1688, and living until the age of 56, passing away just a week or so after his birthday on the 30th of May in 1744. He is astonishingly the second most quoted author in the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, losing first place to none other than Mr. Quotable himself, William Shakespeare. Some say that Pope should be seen in the same way as people like Jonathan Swift and Sir Isaac Newton are for their historical significance and contributions. Also, like Shakespeare, Pope wrote in blank verse, which is a style of writing poetry characterised by its unrhymed lines and were almost always in iambic pentameter. Now, iambic pentameter is a type of metric line used in traditional English poetry and verse drama. It's more specifically defined as a line of verse with 5 metrical feet, each consisting of one short or unstressed syllable, followed by one long or stressed syllable. But in order to understand iambic pentameter fully, you've got to understand like all kinds of other stuff. And this is like songwriting and poetry jargon, and it is really interesting, but there's a lot. So I'm not going to include much more of it here, and it's very much off topic. But If you do want to know what poetic meter is, stress, a verse, a foot, a dactyl, two-syllable trochee, a two-syllable foot, iambic pentameter, and finally, why iambic pentameter is so cool and related to the human heartbeat, that you can watch the TED talk linked in the description. It's only a few minutes long, I promise you it's really cool. But another interesting thing about Pope was the time that he was alive and active, the early 18th century, because literature was just about becoming something that people could actually do as a job and earn money. With the rise of the printing press and more works of literature reaching mass publication, coupled with the fact that more people were learning to read and write just in general, were two of the main reasons for this. From the age of 12, however, Pope suffered from severe health issues that carried on for the rest of his life. These were mostly physical, so it didn't hinder his ability to learn. There was something that did get in the way of that. See, Pope was also a Roman Catholic, as mentioned a little earlier. This was important because at the time England was ruled by a Protestant Catholic, thus life for a Roman Catholic was very difficult. Pope wasn't allowed to hold high public office or even into high society, and by no means was he allowed to marry a Protestant. He couldn't own a gun due to his religion, as well as other kinds of draconian laws and regulations aimed at subjugating Roman Catholics. So Pope's education was affected by the recently enacted Test Acts, which uphold the status of the established Church of England in 1673 until they were later amended and appealed. This caused Pope to have to be homeschooled by his aunt, as well as attend some illegal at the time Roman Catholic schools. Illegal on the grounds of them, of course, being Roman Catholic, or as they called it, nonconformist. Pope's poetic career, though, testifies to his indomitable spirit in the face of disadvantage in health and of circumstance. The poet and his family were Catholics and thus fell subject to the Test Act's prohibitive measures, which severely harmed and hampered the prosperity of their co-religionists too. Pope's work was full of references to the people and places of the time, and this has aided people's understanding of the past for years to come. The post-war period and many tribulations stressed the power of Pope's poetry, recognising that his immersion in Christian and biblical culture lent depth to his poetry. For example, Maynard Mack, a Pope scholar of the latter 20th century, argued that Pope's moral vision demanded as much respect as his technical excellence. I will, however, leave that up to you to decide. And there you have it. That's the story of the proverb and pretty much where it comes from and the man behind it. I do hope you found this somewhat entertaining. It didn't really turn out the way that I wanted it to, but I do think the info in there is still pretty cool, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. But thank you if you made it to the end. I do hope to catch you in the next one. Peace!